Off day and good morning, Biba Betness. This public hearing conducted by the Committee on Education, Public Safety, and the Arts is called to order at 9:12 Chamorro Standard Time. Notice of the hearing was disseminated to all local media outlets on March 17, 2023, with a second notice provided on March 22, 2023. Notice of the hearing was also made known on the Guam Legislature's website and the Government of Guam Public Notices portal. This morning, the committee is holding a public hearing to discuss Bill number 40-37 Core, an act to add a new 3104.1 of Chapter 3 of Title 27 Guam Administrative Rules and Regulation, and a new subsection 51-104.01 of Chapter 51 of Title 17 GCA relative to establishing a moratorium on the pre-employment requirements as a correctional officer of the Department of Corrections, introduced by my colleague, Senator William Parkinson. Upon conclusion of Bill number 40-37 Core, we'll take a 5-minute recess before we hear testimony on Bill number 58-37 Core, an act to repeal subsection 3804 of Article 8, Chapter 3 of Title 16 of the GCA relative to prohibiting panhandling at intersections, introduced by my colleague, Senator Quinata, and co-sponsored by Senators Agustin, Senator William Parkinson, Senator Dwayne, Nicolas, and Senator Dueñas. I'd like to welcome my colleagues joining us today. To my left, Senator Will Parkinson, and to my right, Senator Quinata. Before we begin, thank you, gentlemen. We'd like to go over the general rules of conduct. Individuals testifying shall first be recognized by the chair before speaking and shall state their name for record-keeping purposes. Questions and testimony shall be confined to the substance or nature of the agenda. Personal inference as to the character or motive of any senator or individual testifying is not permitted. The chairperson of the committee may order the removal from a hearing any member of a legislature in Guam who fails to observe proper decorum pursuant to the 37th Guam Legislature standing rules. Any violation of this general rule of conduct will result in the removal from the hearing by the host. I will now proceed with discussions on Bill number 40-37 Core. I'll begin with giving the floor to Senator William Parkinson to present his sponsor statement. Good morning, Senator Parkinson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. First, I want to pay my respects to the Director of the Department of Corrections, Robert Camacho. He was a lifelong public servant and gifted photographer. He dedicated his life to the service to his people and his island. He served the people of Guam through various public safety capacities for 38 years, including the Guam Customs and Quarantine Agency, the Guam Police Department, the Airport Police, and the Department of Corrections. On behalf of a grateful island, I want to offer a moment of silence for Director Robert Camacho. Now, for this bill, Senator Chris Barnett, our Public Safety Chair, has led the way in calling for more officers at the Department of Corrections. The severe lack of manpower has led to a dangerous situation, one that Director Camacho was working so diligently to address. Officers have had to occasionally work upwards of 24 hours straight, often in units where the ratio is 1 correctional officer to upward of 50 inmates, creating a high-risk environment at the department's facilities. The department's management and employees have also voiced concerns about increased risks to their safety and well-being as a result of shortage in manpower. Knowing this information, it is vital that government alleviate the distressed work environment at DOC and enhance the safety of correctional officers. This bill came about as we searched for a solution to the understaffing at DOC. In North Carolina, the state did away with psychological evaluations for their correction officers in 2019. Tracy Little, the Deputy Secretary for Prisons in North Carolina, said this about the change. We are trying to make it easier for the applicants to get through the hiring process and hire more quickly. This recognizes that the most dangerous situations for inmates and personnel at the Department of Corrections is the lack of manpower, and on balance, expediting the process by eliminating psych evals would lead to safer situation as it addresses the critical lack of corrections officers. I want to be clear, this bill does not eliminate psych evals. This bill is based on a similar bill introduced by Senator Talina Nelson in the 35th Guam Legislature, Bill 240-35, and it will put in place a temporary waiver from psych evals in the hiring process so that we may fill critically needed positions more efficiently. Newly hired officers will still eventually have to get a psych evaluation. It just unclogs that logjam in the hiring. Our correctional facilities need qualified and capable people working in them. Having a shortage in manpower in DOC means that we are failing not just the correctional officers, but the inmates as well that we put into our care. In order to do better for them and for the community, we must address this problem, and this is one solution one jurisdiction has already tried with some success in order to address their critical officer shortages. I proffer it to the public and to my colleagues as a possible solution, and I look forward to public testimony today. Thank you for your time, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Senator Parkinson. I will just note for the record that this public hearing began a few minutes ago, and we actually have no one here to testify. I did speak with Major Anton Agustin of the Department of Corrections, and obviously with the passing of the director, Mr. Robert Camacho, I'm not sure if they'll be able to provide testimony this morning. But that being said, Senator Parkinson, I was able to discuss your measure briefly with the late director, Bob Camacho. And I just want to share with you on the record his thoughts on this. He had responded. I had reached out to him as the oversight chair and asked him what were his thoughts on your bill. And he said he was getting input from his command staff. He likes the idea that they remain recruits until they meet all the post requirements to become corrections officers. The challenges, according to the late Mr. Camacho, are definitely the psychological assessments, which cost $500 to $600 per officer. Plus GPD does the polygraph. So that's about all the information I have on your bill. I definitely appreciate your efforts to really fiddle with the processes, because we know they've had that backlog in being able to hire the officers, and anytime we can make it a little easier on the applicants. So we definitely need more applicants. I can appreciate it, and I also can appreciate how you clarified that the bill does not eliminate psych evals, because I think there was some question about that when the bill was first introduced. So again, I thank you for your statements on the record. And that being said, if there are no further questions or comments, or Senator Quinata, did you have any? No? Okay, since there are no further questions or comments, this concludes our discussion on bill number 40-37 core, and we'll continue to receive testimony with the Committee on Education, Public Safety, and the Arts. Okay. And we're going to go ahead and recess for 5 minutes and come back to hear a discussion on bill number 58-37 core. Thank you. And we're back from recess. Again, I want to thank Senator William Parkinson for Bill number 40-37 core. And we now move on to hear Bill number 58-37 core. I want to first recognize the Vice Chair of this committee, the Committee on Education, Public Safety, and the Arts, Senator Dueñas. Good morning, Senator. And now we move to hear Bill number 58-37. I'll begin by giving the floor to Senator Quinata to present his sponsor statement. Senator Quinata, good morning.
Good morning, Mr. Chair. Good morning, colleagues. Bill 58-37 is intended to repeal Section 3804 of Article 8, Chapter 3, Title 16 of the Guam Code Annotated relative to prohibiting panhandling. Under the current Guam statutes, individuals are allowed to solicit donations upon government properties of intersections. The intent of this bill is to prohibit general persons from soliciting money upon government property at and around public intersections or nearby roadways. Our shared goal of our island is public safety. This measure seeks to restrict panhandling activities at traffic intersections and near roadways. This also limits distractions for motorists and pedestrians alike, as they become more mindful of their surroundings. By taking these precautions, we are promoting a safer environment for both drivers and citizens. It is essential for us to take proactive steps in avoiding traffic collisions. Even though we may have a small, close-knit community, I am confident that our dream to end homelessness is shared by many. To achieve this goal, however, all of us must take into consideration the various approaches which can help support those in need. While it is true that panhandling has been observed on our Guam roadways, it also can be dangerous. The threat is posed by such behaviors that still remains to be very real, and actually now it's no longer visible. But that is all, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Senator Quinata. I would now like to throw it over to my colleagues for any comments or questions for the sponsor, and we'll go ahead and start with Vice Chair Senator Dueñas. Good morning, Vice.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman and colleagues. So, as we know, the Attorney General has taken a strong stand on this issue. You know, I want to say I'm sure the author is just as compassionate as all of us here are. When I received an opportunity to be a co-sponsor to this bill, my main intention was the fact that this legislature, I think, has been taking a really strong stance when it comes to trying to ensure that the whole of government, the services that we can provide to our people are what we should be about. You know, I know that people struggle. I know that people have a hard time. I'm a frequent giver to those individuals who, you know, need some assistance, and I try to help where I can. But I think more importantly, we have to continue to try to succeed at a higher level when it comes to taking care of our people and ensuring that individuals, you know, are taken and moved to the programs that can really help them. Mr. Chairman, I'm going to say something that I know our community gets concerned about sometimes too. Sometimes, unfortunately, those that are seeking assistance on the roadside may be individuals who are being trafficked. And I say that because some individuals are there, and I know of this, because they're trying to get money not necessarily for needs. And this is a very few, Mr. Chairman, but it's still very concerning. But by some people who would have control over them, and they take that money and they give it to individuals who would buy drugs with that money. And you know, I'm not a judgmental person. I know a lot of people need help. When I give, I always say to the individual, I pray that you're buying food or paying utilities or rent or some other need and helping your children or whomever else you're trying to help other than yourself with this money. But if not, you know, and if you have a problem, you know, please seek treatment. And I always just, you know, try to give a little bit of hope and assurance. But I think that the nefarious element sometimes with regard to this, Mr. Chairman, is something of deep concern to me, because like I said, I've heard it. I've heard of people who have control over other people and say, go stand in the corner, you know, and when you collect your money, bring it back to me. And That's just true, Mr. Chairman. It's sad, but it's true. Lastly, the safety element. I know that individuals seek other places to, who are really in need to try to get some assistance. I've given to folks at the grocery store, other places, and try to do the best that I can. But in the roadways, Mr. Chairman, I just think it's so important to consider also the safety element. I'm thankful that many have heeded the call of knowing that there's enforcement right now. And I pray that every single one of those individuals that truly and deeply needs help have been able to seek, the proper programs and other government services that can provide for these opportunities. I know we have no one here today, Mr. Chairman, to testify, but I just wanted to share some of my thoughts of why I chose to be a co-sponsor to this bill. Like I said, I don't think the author, and I don't think any of us here are trying to be discompassionate about this. I think that safety, as well as saying, we want to be a good government. We want to be a government that can provide opportunities and care for you in the time of need. So, Mr. Chairman, that's really the comments that I have. I hope the bill will receive favorable consideration and understand the intent. And with that, Mr. Chairman, thank you for the opportunity to allow me to share a few of my thoughts.
Thank you, Vice Senator Parkinson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I am a co-sponsor for this bill, and so I just want to explain my thought process a little bit and just be very clear on what this bill actually does. The bill was requested by the Attorney General and is essentially exactly as requested by the Attorney General. However, I co-sponsored this bill because it repeals a confusing prohibition from panhandling with some downright strange exceptions. As you can see in the first line of the bill, it repeals the prohibition on panhandling. When this section was put into law several years back, it was intended to ban panhandling with these exceptions. So by repealing this section, we are actually repealing the prohibition on panhandling. With this section removed, the only thing remaining in the previous section of law is the section that only outlaws aggressive panhandling. Aggressive panhandling is a term that has legal parameters that are well litigated in case law. It means that a panhandler cannot follow you around, cannot solicit from children, cannot approach your vehicle unless you indicate you want to make a donation. So I just want to get into the record that, this is what this bill actually does. We are not out here banning panhandling. We are removing confusing prohibitions and exceptions that made things very awkward. An example of some of the exceptions is it is prohibited to panhandle unless you put traffic cones and a safety vest. Well, I spoke to some police officers, and they told me that was a very awkward section for them because even though that's what's written in law, they didn't want to be arresting panhandlers for not wearing a vest or a cone. As we all have seen, nobody does that. And so by repealing this, we aren't going after the poor or trying to stop them from doing what we're doing. We're just cleaning up confusing legal jargon by removing this section, but it still only reverts it back to what it was, where only aggressive panhandling is legal, but everything else is still fair game. So I just wanted to get that into the record and clarify that because there seems to be a great misconception that this is making panhandling illegal when the very first line is a repeal on the ban on panhandling. So thank you very much, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Senator Parkinson, and I must admit for the record that I was a little confused about this measure, which was, in my opinion, and according to the title of the bill, banning panhandling, when in fact, you're right, by repealing that whole section, it's actually doing the opposite and only addressing the aggressive panhandling, which again, you said includes people approaching you and approaching your vehicle unless you've indicated that you want to give, which is usually indicated by you roll down the window and you say, hey, come over here.
Yeah, as well as soliciting children and blocking traffic. Like aggressive panhandling is well defined in case law.
Right. Thank you for that. I'm a little disappointed that we didn't receive testimony from the Office of Homelessness and Poverty Prevention, but Senator Quinata, I did just get a message from Chief Steve Ignacio of the Guam Police Department. He's on his way down to testify on this measure, so we might end up recessing just for a little bit, but I did want to provide my thoughts on the bill, which I was offered the opportunity to co-sponsor it, but I declined that just to kind of get more information on this issue, because I know that we have seen aggressive action from the Attorney General Doug Moylan in going after, and in concert with Lieutenant Governor Josh Tenorio, they kind of teamed up on this effort to evict the homeless from private property, and also Attorney General Moylan had come out and actually asked people to call the police on panhandlers. And I know that you've proffered this bill to address the issue, but kind of like when you drive around now, I don't really see many panhandlers left, right? So I think that declaration from the AG, for whatever reason, has actually had an impact on panhandling on our island. And for me, it's a difficult issue, and I don't think it's very black and white, because Guam being a small community, and they always say, Chamorro say, I know, right? But we know that a lot of these individuals who are panhandling, and not all of them, but a lot of them have had falling out with their family members, have been kicked out of the houses that they were living in, oftentimes due to drug addiction, or, in many cases, they have damaged their relationship with their family members, so much so that there's really no turning back. And, like I said, they get kicked out of the house for a variety of things, due to their addiction, in many cases, to crystal methamphetamine. They steal from family members, things like that, and it leads to this break in the familial relationship, which is something, that we're seeing far too often as families struggle to make ends meet. We are seeing a breakdown of the family unit, which is something that, we used to be able to hold up as a source of pride on our island, was that we have very close-knit families. And so I was just concerned that if we're going to eliminate this method of people seeking assistance, and again, to kind of just make the blanket generalization that everybody who's panhandling is on meth, I don't think that's accurate. A lot of them are also suffering from mental health issues. And so I just worried that if we're taking away this ability for these individuals to seek assistance and by panhandling, is our government doing enough to offer the services, the famed wraparound services that we hear so much about from those in our government who are trying to combat homelessness. And I mean, maybe combat's not the right word, but it does kind of seem like we are waging war on the homeless by evicting them and chasing them from properties and intersections. And I just worry that if we're doing that, we need to make sure that we're also on the other side of it, making sure that we're offering services to these people, assistance to these people, so that we're able to, as a government and as a people, lift them out of these circumstances. With that being said, having intimate knowledge of a lot of these panhandlers and homeless people's situation, and coming from the media and speaking with them about how they ended up on these intersections, a lot of them, unfortunately, know of government services that are available, but don't necessarily want to avail of those services. And so I think as a government, it's a very complicated issue when you have people who clearly need help, but have maybe become accustomed to a certain standard of living. And I've interviewed a bunch of these people at the intersections, and in some cases, you can have an individual, because of the generosity of the Chamorro people and the Guamanian residents here, they could be panhandling and make upwards of $100 a day, right? And again, that's because of our generosity. And it's such a complicated issue to deny these people that ability to make that money. And in many cases, they're not making $100. And, just to kind of expand on what the Vice Chair, Senator Dueñas, had said, yes, a lot of them are trying to raise money to feed their addiction, and whether that addiction is crystal meth or alcohol. But some of them are just trying to get a meal at Winchell's. Some of them are trying to get enough money to get a motel room at, one of the cheaper hotels or motels so that they can, take a shower. And so in wading into this very complicated issue, I was just worried that we're kind of at a turning point, right? When I was growing up, we didn't have homeless people. We didn't have, people asking for money at the intersections, and now we do, and it's come to the point where it is just so prevalent. I mean, although the Attorney General's actions and announcements for people to call the police on panhandlers, and even this bill in some way, I think, has created a chilling effect on panhandling. But it hasn't really made a dent in homelessness. Right across the street here, across from the financial bastion that is the Bank of Guam building, there's a homeless couple that sleeps. I don't know you guys see it on the way into the office. There's a homeless couple that sleeps right over here across the street from the bank. And I mean, they're probably just cleaning up right now. So I see them on the way into work. When I come into work early in the morning, you see them at night laying down on this patio. So, for me, the concern is if we're going to, again, deny the people the ability to seek these donations, and I get it totally, then I just want to make sure that our government is doing the most and the best that it can to offer helpful alternatives for that. And then so I was also had raised a concern with Senator Quinata about the boot drives, right? And so if the intent of the measure, but I'm not really sure now because I know that we're just targeting the aggressive panhandling. So I guess I would just ask Senator Quinata, in your opinion, the way the bill is written, would it still allow for these instances where you have like the Guam Fire Department or different organizations, whether they be governmental or nonprofit, seeking assistance at these intersections for, like we've seen it before, typhoon relief or other types of, I guess I'll say, legitimate fundraising? Senator?
At this time, I'm not too sure. I will get clarification legally, but it was to address panhandling entirely, right? But we do have those distress panhandling events, just like the boot drive. But I think it needs to be explored more further if we want to continue that road. But at this time, I'll just defer for legal counsel on that one, right? Thank you.
Thank you, Senator. And would like to recognize Chief of Police, Chief Steve Ignacio. Yes, if you could, Chief.
Mr. Chair, if I
Yes,
may
sir.
quickly, I think I can answer to that
Oh,
question.
yeah, please, Senator Parkinson.
From my research on what we've done on this bill, because we are repealing the prohibition on panhandling, it will not stop any of those legitimate fundraising that you'd mentioned.
So let me just ask you, because I'm not confused, but you said we're still allowing panhandling, but just not aggressive panhandling. So does that mean, in your opinion, that outside of because the Attorney General is saying, oh, call 911, but this measure is targeting the aggressive panhandling. So just in your opinion, if this measure were to be passed into law, would it allow for lack of a better term, nice panhandling?
Yes. The only thing that is prohibited is aggressive panhandling, and that is very clearly defined. As I said in the beginning of my remarks, this bill actually removes the prohibition on panhandling. It's the first line that we're scratching out is a prohibition on panhandling. The confusion comes is When we strike that prohibition on panhandling, we're also striking the sections that give exceptions to that prohibition. So that's where the confusion is coming from. We're just, when I signed on to this bill, it was to clean up that confusing language because we actually simplified it by removing it. The only thing that's not allowed is the aggressive panhandling, the one where we're blocking traffic, soliciting kids, where it's not wanted. It's all very defined on case law so that, it's really just going back to the status quo before that section was put in when we had panhandling already. So I hope that clears it up for Mr. Chair and anybody watching at home.
Thank you, Senator. And another thing, and I'm pretty sure Chief could comment on this when we get to his testimony. Another thing that I'm seeing out here in the public is people who wait outside the store, the mom and pop store in the village. You got people who they just plunta themselves down and outside the store, and everybody who comes out, they get asked, "Oh, do you have $1? Oh, do you have $2?" And I've even seen a case at a local gas station where it was early in the morning, a stop for gas, and there was a lady who had walked in, and as she was walking in, she had taken out her ATM card and gone to the ATM inside the gas station, and you had a homeless guy who was outside get up and follow her in and basically stand behind her and say, "Oh, ma'am, could I get $20?" And so that definitely, to me, that would be aggressive panhandling, correct?
And that would fall under the definition of aggressive panhandling, yes.
Thank you. And we'll go ahead and recognize Chief of Police Steve Ignacio, who's here to provide testimony. Good morning, Chief, and thank you for coming.
Good morning, Senator Barnett and the senators of the 37th Guam Legislature. Thank you and good morning for having me here to testify, provide oral testimony, generally in support of the repeal of the panhandling law. So I think the biggest thing that take away from repealing the panhandling law is the overall safety for those panhandlers and also most especially our motorists. As you've seen recently, there have been quite a few auto pedestrian cases. A lot of them are fatal. And so I think this is a step in the right direction from removing panhandlers from the roadways at intersections especially. And I think we draw attention to ITC where there have been at least 2 recent auto pedestrian cases. I believe both, if not both, then at least one was already was a fatal incident involving a pedestrian. It's my understanding from reading Bill 58-37 that we are just removing panhandling totally, both panhandling and aggressive panhandling, because aggressive panhandling falls under this current statute. So we are removing the act of panhandling, removing it totally from Title 16. And so that's where my concern comes in, is if we remove panhandling totally from the Motor Vehicle Code of Guam, the Title 16, so if a person goes out and continues to panhandle, what now is the crime that the Guam Police Department can enforce? So I think what we need to consider, though, is continue to define what the act of panhandling is and then determine what kind of violation of law is it. Is it going to be continued as a violation where we issue a citation? And as we elevate, we can probably even make an arrest, as we've done in certain recent incidents with, of course, the push of the AG's office to remove the panhandlers and enforce the current law because it's lawful at this point. So how are we going to deal with it? How is law enforcement going to deal with it when I come upon a panhandler in May, should this bill become law, and in May 15th, when it becomes law, what law am I enforcing if we repealed the whole section? I don't have any teeth to enforce to give a citation. I can't make an arrest because now I don't have a law to enforce. So I think something we need to consider, this body needs to consider, is that it still needs to be defined, and then it needs to be defined as to what level of a crime it's going to be. Is it just going to continue to be a violation? Are we going to make it a petty misdemeanor? Are we going to make it a misdemeanor? God forbid we make it a felony, because I don't think this rises to that level of a felony. But I think we need to go back and look at the law and say, hey, look, this is the act of panhandling, and this is illegal now, and if you do it, it's a violation. You're going to get a citation, possibly an arrest, or is it going to be an arrest from the first incident because it's classified as a petty misdemeanor or a misdemeanor. Repealing the whole section doesn't give the officers out on the street any teeth to do any enforcement because we've repealed the whole law and we don't have a law to enforce. The second thing to consider, though, is defining what really is panhandling, because is panhandling just a person standing on the side of the road saying, I'm hungry, holding up his cardboard box and saying, one, I'm hungry, and I'm homeless. But he's not asking you for money, right? So is that just a form of speech that is protected by the Constitution? Because he's not asking you for money. This person is just merely there at the intersection, standing there with a sign that says, I'm hungry and I'm homeless. No different than if somebody was standing out at the intersection saying, end domestic violence, right? It's an expression of speech and it's protected. And so, again, I would suggest that we continue to define what panhandling is and make sure it's differentiated between a form of speech that is protected by the Constitution and defining the act that actually makes it illegal. So those are my thoughts. Those are my simple thoughts in this matter. I think just repealing the whole section does not do anything for the Guam Police Department in terms of giving us teeth to enforce a law. So thank you very much for your time, and thank you, Senators, for listening to my oral testimony.
Thank you, Chief, for testifying. So I guess we'll defer to the chair on public safety, and then we'll make some corrections again with whatever public testimony comes in. We'll make those changes together, and we'll work collaboratively to ensure that there is some teeth and move forward with whatever language needs to be addressed.
Sure, and
Okay.
I have some stuff that was just forwarded to me this morning coming out of the ACLU on this matter, and so I would forward that to the good senator for consideration.
Thank you, Chief. Yeah.
Awesome. Obviously, it's not in my intent to infringe on anyone's liberty or free
Right.
speech.
Absolutely.
If they are protected under the Constitution, to go out there and present themselves pro-life, pro-choice, whatnot, of course, or for whatever sexual assault
Right.
waiving, right? We want to ensure that that is protected under the, their civic engagement
Right.
operation, right?
And I heard there was some conversation up there, or there was some testimony up there about doesn't prohibit, though. I would say that if we entirely repeal panhandling, then that means some of these boot drives that the government employees do in support of maybe some kind of catastrophic event in some neighboring island, like we've done it before for Saipan, right? They were affected by a storm. The government of Guam went out, did a boot drive. One of the more popular ones is, I think, it's American Cancer Society, maybe the one, or the Red Cross, where, GovGuam, wants to participate in fundraising events, and a boot drive is one of the things we do. So just as a point of information, if we repeal this whole section, then really technically government employees can no longer go out and do boot drives at the intersection. Because if it's illegal for the panhandlers, then it should be applied as well to the government of Guam.
That is correct.
That, right?
And
So I
it's
wanted to
duly
point that
noted,
out,
yeah.
that we're no longer be able to be using that form of effort to help raise funds for whatever the good cause is.
And I'm glad you brought that up, because it is not the effort of the government of Guam to go and panhandle. It is requested by NGOs or whatnot.
Right.
Partnerships. So thank you for clarifying that, Chief. Really appreciate it.
Thank you very much for allowing me to come down. I apologize I was late. I got my times mixed up.
The chief arrives precisely when he means to. Chief, if you don't mind, I'd like to,
Sure, absolutely.
Vice Chair Senator Dueñas, go ahead.
Chief, I'm glad you showed up, because that was my understanding of what I was signing on to. And once again, for clarification, I sympathize with your position, and I'm glad you brought it to us, because my thought process was to repeal it and rebuild it.
Okay.
Because, Chief, from what I understand, just to kind of maybe go through this real quick, the medians have always been against the law, correct?
Yeah, they've always been off limits, yes.
Okay, because, we're talking about public safety here, And so, the medians just seem like should be enforced outright, simply because you're literally in lanes of traffic where, first of all, the individual I feel so sorry for, because that's extremely dangerous. Second is that the medians are normally really where the solid flow of traffic is. So good-hearted people who are compelled to give, a lot of times in this, and I'm sure you got reports of this, Chief, people stop while the flow of traffic is going to give, and that is a very, very dangerous situation. So that is one of the reasons why I wanted to revisit this and be very clear and explicit. Now, my thought process was, as we rebuild it, it would include rights of way to ensure that even if an individual was to, seek help on a roadway, literally it wouldn't be intersections or rights of way of traffic. Could be some sort of off-road, away from the intersection opportunity and the like, for exactly what you've talked about, the rights. And then, of course, considering putting in government or an NGO requests, and that would be based on a permit.
Right.
And then that way it's just not ad hoc, or some people use the term willy-nilly, but it would be, under a controlled circumstance, and even that would probably, that was an attempt at a slight of my good colleague, that would also probably be, because even with that, Chief, I gotta say, I've been concerned about, even with law enforcement or NGOs, being on the medians. I know they're really, really, they're the top-notch individuals who understand how to stay away from flow of traffic and the like, but I just think that even if that should be permitted for the roadsides and not in the middle of the islands of the intersection. So that was my thought process in signing on to this. And then also I concur with our chairman, and everybody here I think believes this, that our bigger mission here is to get people to services. Yeah. Because we have services available, and if more services are needed, then that's our obligation. But the bottom line is that having a prohibition, a regulated prohibition, I think leads people to services, and opportunities. So that was my reading of it, Chief, and I'm glad you came here to clarify it. We repeal it and then we rebuild it. That was my effort here to join the good sponsor. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Senator, thank you for pointing that out about the government employees or NGOs. My biggest stomachache, if I send my officers out there or my personnel to the intersections and they get hit, I may have created a workman's compensation issue because, they're probably on the clock out there soliciting for money, and God forbid they get hit and die or get hit and seriously injured. And that's on me as a department head, and that becomes my liability, and it probably is going to end up as a workman's compensation issue, and something I have to deal with. Yeah. So thank you for pointing it out. Yes. Yeah, it's not safe to put people in the middle of the road or in a median, running in between cars, whether you're a government or NGO or panhandler, because at the end of the day, when it's a car versus a human, cars win all the time.
Senator Parkinson, any comments, questions?
Yes, actually, we really got to have a conversation about this, because there seems to be a gross misunderstanding about what this bill does. This does not ban panhandling. It just flat doesn't. So let me just do with some flexibility, I'd like to do a little bit of a history lesson. What this bill does is it repeals Section 3804, which is a prohibition on panhandling and the exceptions to that prohibition. The other section that is untouched is Section 3803, and that is the section that bans aggressive panhandling. Now, prior to 2013, the only section that existed on Guam's books was Section 3804 or 3803, which banned aggressive panhandling. However, because there was such a problem with panhandlers in general, in 2013, the legislature passed a Section 3804 that bans panhandling with some exceptions. So right now, what we are doing in this body is we are attempting to repeal the prohibition on panhandling. So this does not make panhandling illegal, and and even though that may have been the legislative intent of the Attorney General, when I read it, that is not the effect. And I supported it because it does not ban panhandling, but it does clean up some confusing language. The reason we do not want to repeal Section 3803 is that is the prohibition on the type of panhandling we don't want. That is the solicitation to children, that is blocking traffic, that's unwanted solicitation where we're knocking on them. So aggressive panhandling is a well-defined legal term, and so you will find that boot drives and whatever NGO partnerships we have, that is not affected by the panhandling law. In fact, if we repeal this section, this just takes us back to all of the to where we were circa 2013. So this is not a ban on panhandling, and you're right, it does not affect your ability to enforce or anything, because it doesn't ban panhandling. That's right. That's why you're having problems with enforcement, because this doesn't give you any enforcement authority, because it basically just legalizes all panhandling except the aggressive kind.
Right, okay.
And so I just wanted to make everybody clear on this, because I know this is what, I know the AG, when he proffered this bill, he thinks he is banning panhandling, but I signed on to it because I saw he's really not. And I just didn't see fit to correct them at the time. So this bill does not ban panhandling, it just clears up confusing language. And again, if you look, the first line of Section 3804 is a ban on panhandling, and we are repealing that. So for anybody that thinks this is a ban on panhandling, let this be a correction that it is not. If we pass this law, we're going to have the exact same panhandlers that we do now. It's
Right.
just now the language is a little bit clearer. Now you don't have to arrest people because they're not wearing a vest. Now you don't have to arrest people because they're not using cones. Because Section 3804 still prohibits panhandling except in these situations. And I know when I spoke with some of your officers, they had mentioned that they don't want to arrest somebody because they're not wearing a vest. I mean, have you guys ever arrested somebody for not wearing a vest while panhandling?
Not to my recollection.
So there's no real necessary in having these exceptions, are there?
And well, I would request though that we provide some input then what the markup or build up to this bill would be to kind of make it, if it is the intent of this bill or this body to continue then to go back to the panhandling as it exists,
Circa 2013.
circa 2013, then maybe we can take some of the stuff in aggressive panhandling and apply it to the circa 2013 law.
There is one section I would be open to adding to aggressive panhandling, and that is, you know, maybe we can consider people panhandling on the medians as aggressive panhandling.
So,
because for me, that is a legitimate safety concern. People shouldn't be panhandling on the medians. So I would be open to something like that as potentially an addendum to what constitutes aggressive panhandling. But just for the intents of this bill does not ban panhandling. It does not. It just flat does not. It removes the prohibition against it plus the exceptions. So I wanted to clear up that confusion with you, because that's why it doesn't seem to give you any enforcement power, because it really doesn't.
Okay, and thank you for pointing that out, because I guess I'm like under the impression that most other people that what we're doing is just entirely removing the Panhandling Act and just making it, any form of it, illegal.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so that was my concern, is if we remove everything then, and it's,
Yeah.
does not
Actually,
exist.
if we were to move to Section 3503, that would be problematic, because then we legalize aggressive panhandling.
Right.
So we
And that
definitely
was
don't
my-
want to leave
that's-
that. We
that was my
definitely want to
concern.
take that out.
Yeah, that was my concern coming in here, is the way I read it, probably like everybody else, we're removing panhandling and period, it's illegal, but my concern is if we removed it totally, then I don't have any law to enforce.
No, there's been a great mischaracterization of what this bill does in the media, and so like, yeah, I definitely want to clear that, because yeah, it does not ban panhandling at all, and so if your recommendation to this body is that we should ban panhandling, I will tell you this bill doesn't do that, but I would give your policy recommendations to the chair, and maybe you could have that conversation, but it's not in this bill.
Yes, sir, I will.
I think where the confusion is coming from, and I have to admit I'm confused as well, and maybe this is what led to your confusion, Chief, is it's right in the title. I mean, it says an act to repeal subsection 3804 of Article 8, Chapter 3 of Title 16 of the Guam Code annotated relative to prohibiting panhandling at intersections. So of course, when you see prohibiting panhandling at intersections, I mean, you know, common sense to think that this measure prohibits panhandling at intersections. And so I don't know if that was the intent of the author, was to ban panhandling, because that's what I understood the intent of this bill was.
Right,
But
and
I
yeah,
thought
that's how I
that,
read it.
I actually thought there was a mistake in it, because by repealing that whole section, you're actually not prohibiting panhandling. So there's obviously some work to do in the committee and markup, and want to work closely with you and incorporate your concerns and ideas into the bill. But Senator Quinata?
Yes, sir.
Again, we'll take in all the testimony after the 10 days, then we'll provide an adjusted bill, and we'll provide it to the body to make decisions from there. Again, at this time, we're not trying to infringe on anyone's liberties, more or less anyone's civic responsibilities. So, and I also don't want to have anyone arrested for not wearing a vest or whatnot.
Yes,
but
sir.
putting
Understood.
teeth into the bill obviously should be another necessity. We don't want anyone to go out there and then be stuck between a rock and a hard place, right? It's not fair for you guys to be trying to enforce something that's more or less impossible to enforce, because you're just going to be putting someone in for like a 24-hour hold, and then they're back out on the streets again to do the same thing.
Yes, sir.
Without any grounds to enforce, right?
Yes.
So we're definitely going to take your recommendations, and to whomever wants to put in other recommendations into consideration, and then we'll have a drafted markup. Okay?
Okay, yes, sir. Thank you very much, sir.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes, Vice Chair, please proceed.
Yeah, I just wanted to also interject, and I'm glad the author will be moving for a markup on this bill, coming from a recommendation from the Attorney General's office, and we'll look forward to his written testimony. I signed on to this bill based on also the findings and intent, which clearly read the intention that supports the title of the bill. And once again, the bill and act to repeal 3804 of Article, Chapter, Title, or 3 of Title 16, the Guam Code annotated relative to prohibiting panhandling at intersections. And the legislative intent describes that persons approaching vehicles, awaiting traffic lights, distracted drivers, endangered panhandling pedestrians, and other sidewalks, as well as drivers. These activities create income-generating transactions that oftentimes are untaxed. It's also maybe a coordinated financial enterprise. That goes to all my testimony on the bill, Chief.
Yes, sir.
And that's why, you know, I guess I'm upset with myself for not digging into the statute a little deeper and taking it on the legislative description of title of the bill, as well as the intent and the strike through on 3804, which reads, lawful panhandling precautions. And so I will await the written testimony. I think, Mr. Chair, or the author of the bill, we should write to the AG based on the recommendation for this bill and get a clarification of what's been presented by my good colleague, Senator Parkinson here, and that will allow for the markup for the repeal of sections, if it's the intent still of this committee, to have the applicable section struck to match the title and the legislative findings and intent. With that, thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Vice. Chief, I just wanted to ask, this relative to a similar issue, panhandling homeless. You know, you often see, and I've interviewed some people who, and I don't know if this is a myth or if you have any knowledge of it, but this idea that homeless people from other jurisdictions like New Jersey or Hawaii are given, a one-way ticket to Guam? Because, when you go around, you see people who, and we all know, these people aren't from Guam. How'd they get here? And they're oftentimes homeless. Oftentimes you see them panhandling, or sometimes, like you said, not necessarily the act of asking for money, but the act of, I have a sign, God bless you, or I'm homeless, or any help, yada, yada. So are you able to shed any light on those types of situations? Are those real?
No, sir, but I think I see what everybody else sees, and, we kind of see people who don't generally fit into our general population, right? They're not Chamorros, they're not Micronesians, they're not, from the FSM or from wherever they came from regionally. And, so all of a sudden we see, an African-American gentleman, a Caucasian person, and, he's kind of new to the scene. And we're like, wow, where'd you come from and how'd you get here? But I know it's not something we've actually stopped and kind of asked people. But I probably like you, I've probably heard stories that they may have been sent here on a one-way ticket with a little bit of cash in their pocket, just to get them out from whatever state they came from. Yeah. But they're just pure speculation. Yeah.
Thank you, Chief. Anything else?
No,
Are you
sir,
good?
thank you very much.
Okay, thank you for your
Mr.
testimony.
Chair, just one more question.
Yes, sir, Vice.
I just don't want this notion to be left on the table as well. This discussion about stores, storefronts, other properties, the reality is that the solicitation law is durable enough for business owners to kindly ask individuals to not panhandle in front of their stores. Would that be
Right.
correct?
Yes, and generally what we enforce, if it's at a, like again, shopping center, for example, if they're asked already to leave and not solicit, and their actions are unwanted on the premises, then it actually becomes a criminal trespass. And that's the law that we enforce.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Chief.
Thank you, Vice. I think and Chief, before you go, I think the issue with that, especially at these village mom and pop stores, is it's unrealistic to expect a little cashier lady to go out and say, hey, you're harassing the customers, or we don't want you asking for money here. And they have, I've seen them get aggressive in requesting that. So would you suggest in those types of cases that they call the Guam Police Department for assistance?
Oh, yes, absolutely. And we do get calls, we get a lot of calls from a lot of businesses because they do have aggressive solicitors, because they're not panhandlers, they're solicitors. They're right there at the front door, when you enter or exit. And so, we remove them, and if it warrants then an arrest, and it's a criminal trespass.
Chief, just a point of clarification. Do you think, or is it required by law for you guys to enforce the no solicitation on private property, that there needs to be signage in place?
Generally, so with the criminal trespass statute, it's either one, you're notified by the property owner, the legal property owner, or two, there's some kind of barrier, like a fence, chain link fence. And there's, or three, there's notice given to the person that their presence is not wanted.
Okay. Thank you for that clarification.
Okay, yes, sir.
Thank you, Chief.
You're welcome, sir.
That's that.
Have a good day, Senators.
Thank you so much for your testimony. And if there aren't any further questions or comments, I'd like to turn it over to the author for closing. Senator Quinata.
I just wanted to say thank you, Chief, and thank you to my colleagues for all of the recommendations. We definitely will work with the chairman on public safety and education to ensure that all the concerns that were brought up between ourselves to make the correct changes and get legal counsel as well, and work with the request of the AG's office to ensure that the language we've put in this bill is true and correct, and make sure that we're not infringing on anyone's liberties, more or less infringing on anyone's civic engagement opportunities or freedom of speech. So with that being said, I throw it back to the chair.
Thank you, Senator Quinata. Again, if there are no further questions or comments, This concludes the public hearing. The committee will continue to accept written statements. If you want to submit a testimony on today's hearing within 10 business days from today, and they may be sent to my office. You can drop it in person here on the second floor of the Guam Congress Hall building at 163 Chalan Santo Papa in Agustin, or you may email your statements and testimony to malafunction@guamlegislature.org. That's MALAFUNKSHUN @guamlegislature.org. Thank you for your participation. This public hearing is adjourned at 10:17 Biba Betnes, Chamorro Standard Time. Esta.